Welcome back to another episode of the Find Food Freedom Podcast. This is your host, Sam Previtt, and I am delighted that you are here. For those of you who are OG listeners, you have noticed that we have a different intro to the podcast. And I thought, why not dedicate an episode of how I got to this new intro? Somebody a few weeks ago, maybe it was a few months ago at this point, left a Apple Podcast review of like, I love your podcast. It's great, but the intro feels so redundant and it's so long and I don't want to have to skip through that. And I think podcasts have evolved over the years, but I had that intro stating like my credentials and why you're here and who we are and all of these things over and over again because if you're new, I want you to know those things. But I felt like, you know what, maybe we don't need this long intro. And I had been feeling that. And then I read this review and I felt like, okay, maybe this is like, you know, the universe aligning where it's like, it's time for something fresh, for something vibey, for something quick. Like, I want you to get to the bulk of these episodes right away. So I don't want you to have to skip through a 2 minute intro to do that. So I want to talk about why I chose those quotes. I have them in front of me, but I also like wanted to give myself space for my brain to just see what other quotes come up. I think as a professional in the intuitive eating, food, body image space, these are quotes, the quotes that are in the intro, but also like quotes in general really stick with you on your healing journey. And so this is an opportunity for you to reflect on what quotes have really helped you on your healing journey, because I think quotes and words and journaling are so helpful when you're healing your relationship with food and body. So before we jump into the bulk of today's episode, I did want to share the Find Food Freedom win of the week. This is a DM that I got from a listener of the podcast, as well as a client of ours. So she wrote in, "Hi, I shared your Instagram story with my close friend's story, but I didn't send it to you, even though I tagged you, assuming since it was on close friends. Anyway, I just wanted to share in the DMs here too. Thank you so much for this podcast episode and every podcast episode you put out. I feel so much better going into my appointment in a few weeks. I also have the amazing support from Alex Spicer on your team, Sam. Keep doing what you do. It's incredible and literally life changing with 6 heart emojis." So thank you to this person for sharing. I probably could have left out the beginning of how she was saying she shared that on her own Instagram story. But I want to just do a quick shout out to our provider, Alex Spicer. She's one of our incredible intuitive eating dietitians on our Find Food Freedom team. And she specializes in PCOS and intuitive eating. And she has a full client load. She meets with primarily women, but accepts all genders. And we get so much positive feedback from her. So anytime we get any type of, I call them client wins, I love to share them. And not only is this person, a listener of the podcast and has had so much growth from just listening to the podcast and the social media content that we put out as a team, but also is working one on one with one of our providers using her health insurance benefits. So if you're someone that's like, oh, whoa, what was that? I can use my health insurance to meet with you. Yes, you can. And I love at the end of the year to give you those reminders. If you met your deductible, if you've met your out of pocket max, chances are you definitely have free coverage with us. But even if not, so many people have these benefits and have no idea. You might have 3 sessions, 10 sessions, unlimited sessions to meet with our team virtually, one on one. So you can click the link below in the show notes, go to Instagram, go to TikTok, bit.ly/FFF insurance. Get your benefits checked. There is no downside. I can't stress enough that with the holidays upon us, we are almost 10 weeks out from Christmas. Holy shit. It is so important to get that support from an intuitive eating dietitian because there's so many more triggers when it comes to food and body image during the holidays, the social events, the pictures, the more indulgent foods that are around. There's so much that comes up the stupid shit that our loved ones say about Ozempic and diet culture. I cannot stress enough. Get support. It is probably free with your health insurance benefits. If you're already paying for health insurance, then get your benefits checked. Fun fact, last week on the pod, I shared that I was back in Pittsburgh. Great episode to listen to, by the way, because I feel like I was just in like a funny mood because I was recording in my parents' basement. And when you're just like in an environment that you grew up in, there's just like memories flashing in your brain. So great episode to listen to. But the reason why I'm bringing that up again is I teased it on that podcast and now it is a fish. We are licensed in the state of PA as a team. So if you live in Pennsylvania, which your girl's a Yinzer, right? I grew up in PA. I went to Penn State. We are. I actually just got my toddler to yell, "We are Penn State" this weekend, which was glorious. So if you're a Pennsylvanian and you want to work with our team, we are now accepting licensure. We have licensure in the state of PA. So PA gals, PA boys, PA theys, we are here for you. And please, please, please get your benefits checked. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the quotes. And I think this is really important. I was just gonna like let the new intro slide and let people enjoy it and listen to it. And for those of you who this is your first time here, you're like, oh, that intro was vibey, but you've never heard my intro before, so you didn't know it was new. Um, I very strategically pulled quotes. Like I sat down at my computer and I said, what are quotes that I say all the time? And as a provider in this space, of intuitive eating, you find yourself constantly coming back to things and saying things in session with clients over and over and over again. Not because everybody's the same, not because you're having the same conversations, but you're noticing that there's quotes that just hit people's heartstrings and that really help. And so that's where I allowed myself to just kind of like brain dump those on a page. And I wanted to obviously you heard them in the intro, but I wanted to like talk about them and kind of like riff off of that where you can journal about them. You can use these as journal prompts and see what comes up for you. And I went two different directions, right? I did the body image, like relationship with body quotes, and then I did the relationship with food quotes. And I think it's important to recognize that our relationships with food and body are separate relationships, but they hold so many parallels. And when you're on this intuitive eating journey, when you are making peace with food and body, there is no way to talk about your relationship with food without interweaving that relationship with body and vice versa. And that's something I want to disclaimer when you are getting professional support from an intuitive eating dietitian, from a dietitian in general, from a therapist, they have to have experience and credentials and continuing education in both. Um, Take it from someone who I came from diet culture. What I mean by that, if you've listened to any of my podcast episodes, if you've seen what I share on social media, I was classically trained in diet culture as a dietitian, which most dietitians are. And so when I was doing the unlearning and shifting over into the intuitive eating realm, I naturally started with the food, right? You start with that anti-diet, like fuck dieting, and you start to learn intuitive eating. And then you realize, oh, there is no way to to approach your relationship with food without talking about body image. And I started to notice clients talking about body image. And then I was like, oh, I don't I don't have the tools to talk about this. I don't know what to do. And so then there was more learning to be done and more continuing education to be done. And you have to seek it out as a provider. So please, if you are getting professional support, of course, I trust and know the Find Food Freedom providers, but it's so important to make sure if you're seeking help, let's say outside Find Food Freedom, ask your providers what are their credentials, what is their continuing education, what experience do they have with body image in addition to food, because it's so important to have both. Okay, I digress. Okay, your relationship with your body is the longest relationship you will ever be in. Boom. I feel like, okay, I'm saying mic drop while I should just like drop this one. When I heard that quote And I don't know who to give credit to. And this is the issue with social media, right? Is you see quotes everywhere and then you see people re-quoting people. And like, I think this might have been Brie Campos from Body Image with Brie. I don't know if it was her original quote. I don't know if I saw it on her page. Go follow Brie either way. Doesn't matter if it was her quote or not. She is an incredible body image therapist and someone I recommend following. But this quote changed the way I practice with clients because it makes you see your relationship with your body as exactly that, a relationship. So, for example, I want you to think of a relationship with a partner, whether you're currently in a relationship, whether you've had a relationship in the past, maybe you've never dated. So, let's say your relationship with a loved one. It doesn't matter if it's, a romantic partner. Every relationship that you hold with another human being is a relationship, which means some days you're going to have bad days. I'll use myself as an example. My husband, I love him to death. He is an incredible husband. He's an incredible father. Does that mean every single day that we have together is full of rainbows and unicorns and glitter and love and heart eye emojis? No. There are some days where I want to rip his head off. And does that mean that we have a bad marriage? No. But I love to use that analogy of like, you're going to have bad days in all relationships. So when you start to think of your relationship with your body as a relationship, then it normalizes that some days are going to be fucking hard and you're going to just have a bad day and have negative body image thoughts. And instead of judging yourself or guilting yourself or shaming yourself for this, you're going to be able to lean in and say, oh, it's just a bad day. And you're going to allow those thoughts, those negative thoughts to just leave the brain, to just let them go. And you're going to be able to build coping mechanisms that help you. Now, I love also to just bring awareness to this quote of like the longevity of the relationship of your body. This might sound woo woo and hippy dippy or whatever you want to say, but and really deep, truly. But when you think about it, like your body, like I'm like touching my body, right? Your body is the vessel that carries you through this entire life. It's the home to your soul. And so, why not try to have a pleasant relationship with it? Another quote that, ooh, should have added this in the intro, but see, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to create space to talk about these quotes. You cannot hate your way to happiness. And that couldn't stand more true when it comes to body image is if you think that you can just hate your body and say, you have to be smaller. I hate your arms. I hate your stomach. And then that magically one day you're just going to shrink your body and wake up and look in the mirror and say, I love myself. It doesn't work that way. So your body, right? It's the longest relationship you're ever going to be in. It deserves TLC. It deserves tender love and care. It deserves compromise. It deserves compassion. It deserves empathy. It deserves respect. And it's okay if you're at such an unpleasant place right now. I'm not trying to make you feel any way about that, but I want to encourage you to do the body image work. It's some of the hardest work that you're ever going to do. And it's some of the most rewarding because your body carries you through this world. So if you have a pleasant relationship with your body, you're going to see the world in such more of a pleasant lens. I had a client once say to me, she said, before intuitive eating, my life was in black and white, and now I see the world in color. And I was like, oh, that's so fucking beautiful. Um, I love this, just like sharing quotes and like really getting deep with some of this stuff. And my iced coffee is hitting just perfect right now, where it's really making this episode even better. Okay, so the next quote in the intro was, you must have unconditional permission to eat in order to make peace with food. This is like one of those big misconceptions with intuitive eating that all the haters of intuitive eating will be like, you just are telling people to eat everything all the time and never say no to food. I'm not fucking saying that. Not saying that. I'm saying that as a human being, you have unconditional permission to eat. Does that mean that you have to say yes to everything. Nope, sure doesn't. And of course, as someone who's dieted for 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you are going to, I'm letting you know, I'm setting the expectations. In the beginning of your intuitive eating journey, you are going to feel this pull to say yes to more foods, especially the foods that you've not been allowed, air quotes, to eat. So the cakes, the cookies, the pizzas, the crackers, the chips, the carbs, the foods that have been off limits from diet culture for so long, physically or mentally and emotionally, right? So if you've maybe even physically allowed yourself to eat this food, but mentally and emotionally, every time you eat it, there's that commentary in your head of like, I shouldn't be eating this. I'm such a bad person for eating this. Of course, you're going to want to eat more of those foods once you have the permission to eat them. But I promise you, it's not going to be like that forever. And that's where this is such a crucial part of intuitive eating. It's principle number 3, make peace with food. And this is what you see on social media when people talk about intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is so much more than just principle number 3, but it had to be worked into the intro because it's like the pinnacle. It's like the puzzle piece that has to come first before we can address hunger, fullness, satisfaction, like, coping with emotions with kindness, emotional eating. All of these other things cannot be worked on until we work on unconditional permission to eat and removing the morality associated to food. Okay. Quote number 3, it's kind of like a question, multiple lines, if you will. But I said, what is your self-talk like about your body? If you wouldn't say that to a loved one about their body, what makes it okay to say it to yourself? I have held so many master classes and virtual talks on this, conversations with people about body image. And this one is always such a light bulb moment that I can't explain how many people in the like chat box have said, I'm getting emotional or I'm crying, when they notice that the way that they speak to themselves about their body is so negative, and they would never say that out loud to someone else about their body. Now, I also want to just put a disclaimer that if you're like, well, I have said that out loud to my daughter about her body, or I have said that out loud to my husband or to my partner or to my mother or to like, this is not about guilting or shaming you. This is about recognizing that you are now learning things that you've never learned before. And you need to give yourself that grace that you've always been doing the best you can with the resources that you have had. And now you're learning new things, and we cannot do better until we learn. And so it is so important to give yourself grace that how we speak to others about their body, how we speak about random strangers' bodies, how we speak about our own body, we are now peeling back those layers and learning, why do I think this way about bodies? Where have I learned this before? If I would never say it out loud to somebody else about their body, why is it okay for me to speak that way to myself? And this is where the magic happens with the body image work. Sit with those questions, journal about it, and I encourage you and invite you so deeply to get one-on-one professional support to work through this stuff. Last but not least, this is a safe virtual space where we're going to dig in and have those heart-to-heart convos, and everything comes back to our relationship with food and body. This is such an important line in my intro because I am a human being with many different things that make me, Sam Previtt, who I am. And I share things about IVF, pregnancy, postpartum. I don't know, maybe like personal anecdotes about a story that happens in my life. Maybe it's something related to marriage or travel or things that I enjoy. And I say this because there was a part in my career and my sharing online that I felt paralyzed because I felt like I could only talk about intuitive eating because that's only what people wanted to hear about. But I think something I've learned over the years that has been so magical and helpful, and I hear it from people over and over and over, is I love to share personal things with you that maybe aren't directly related to food and body image, but as I share them, they relate to food and body image. So, for example, the last few weeks on the podcast, I've shared my Lexapro update and my choice and my decision to go on anxiety and depression meds, right? And I was teetering back and forth about sharing this. I'm like, do people really care? Is it going to really help? I started to do some polls on Instagram and I noticed that some of the most engagement I've ever gotten on Instagram has been with these medications. And I've noticed that so many people that are trying to make peace with food and body image also struggle with anxiety and are on anxiety medications. I also know that as a human, anxiety 100,000% affects how we make choices around food and our body and our self talk. And so, why I say this is on this podcast, maybe not every single episode is going to be like, you know, principle number 3 of intuitive eating. But the things that I share that are personal for me, I will always loop back to our relationship with food and body. And that's Find Food Freedom. And a mentor of mine once asked me this question. She said, this is when I was struggling with like, how do I share things that aren't just so black and white with food freedom or intuitive eating? And she asked me, Sammy, when you find food freedom, right? When you feel like you have such a pleasant relationship with food and body, is the work done? Like, do people need to unfollow you on your social media page because, oh, okay, I'm not going to get any, more info here. I'm not going to benefit from this page anymore. And I was like, no, that's not it at all. If anything, it's like once you have food and body image freedom, right? And it's always an ongoing journey, but once you feel pleasant with these relationships, you then get to enjoy the special life moments and you get to always reflect back on like, oh, this previous version of myself would have totally ruined this life moment. Like, let's use the example I shared on Instagram. I was sharing like painting pumpkins with my daughter on a weekend day and like thinking about how in the past I would have probably been like obsessing over like what was I eating? What can I get my workout in? Like how many calories was I going to burn? And like I wouldn't be like present in that moment because I'm too obsessed about all these other things. So when it comes to like what Find Food Freedom is all about, it's getting to that place of freedom where you can enjoy your life because life was meant for so much more than just food and body. Like once you make peace with those things, then you get to enjoy your life. And that freedom is like the centerpiece that catapults this beautiful life. So you probably didn't think the 30-second intro of the Find Food Freedom podcast was that deep. But like those quotes, I wanted to like interject off of them and go deeper into them of like why I chose them and why they're so important. So I'm so excited that you listened to this episode, that you're here. I encourage you to get support with our team. I think it's some of the most life-changing work that you could ever do. So check your benefits by clicking the link in our show notes, by going to our social media pages. If you don't already, follow along on Instagram at find.food.freedom. Please, please, please go to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. If you leave a review, don't only tell me what you like, but tell me what you want to hear more of, because the more that I hear from you, the more I can personalize these episodes to speak directly to you. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.